I've always typically associated with femininity, as well as just like the story of dance of the dying swan, just because I guess by the nature of it.
I typically connect the variation of the dying swan to femininity. We kind of imagine this cohort of really strong but elegant women. I think also we categorize the music as very feminine because it uses a lot of high notes and has just a very like graceful quality to it.
Gender kind of ascends death in a way, and so to me it would make sense that a male or a female could do it, or just anybody in general. I don't think gender really has to play a role with the piece itself, just for like the more of the feeling that it emotes.
Something that I personally love about just the performing arts in general is the ability to just kind of express yourself and express your creativity and experiment and things like that. And I think especially in this day and age, that's more important than ever. And gender inclusivity is 100% a part of that, in my opinion.
I agree with what all you three just said. I will counter argue, saying like a lot of our classical ballets, like Sleeping Beauty, a lot of the movements are what made it classic.
Okay, so I definitely think after listening to everybody week after week, I think it's open to many different interpretations. Like, let's say some part in the music may bring out different emotion in somebody compared to somebody else. And I think it just goes to add to the idea of like individualism, and it's just shows how personalized this piece can be to anybody and open for multiple interpretation.
I definitely agree. It kind of gives me a new perspective on traditional rep. Sort of like when you think of all these traditional ballets, you think of it having a set rep, a set choreography, like a set interpretation. But now sort of like hearing everyone's different personal stories, it kind of pushes me to sort of personalize every piece that I do and sort of think about how I would interpret it. And I think taking into consideration everyone else's stories and personalizations of this rep really like makes me become a better artist, I think.
Before the project, I knew that the music was very familiar because I feel like we all have danced to it in adagio during ballet class. But about the piece, I knew that when Anna Pavlova performed, the choreographer, Mikhail, he allowed her to improvise during the piece. So I thought it was really, really cool. And also, I noticed that to perform a solo like that, the dancer has to have this type of like maturity, because she's expressing such a like, deep emotions.
I've also seen the piece many times. I think it's really beautiful choreography. I think some qualities that I associate with it are elegance, length, grace, delicacy. And I think it's really fascinating because even though the music kind of also has those similar qualities, there are so many different interpretations.
I think at first the thing that stood out to me the most was the contrast in the music of I believe the cello versus the piano or harp, and kind of the more emotional aspects of the cello and how it would kind of portray a more mellow, maybe torn between yourself, where you're like struggling a little bit with yourself, and then the piano kind of acted as this like steady, kind of like a heartbeat almost.
I think the main thing that I've learned, besides just like you were talking about the instruments and how it's really interesting to like listen to how like the little elements all combine, is just how many different ways there are of interpreting it, and listening to how everyone has like created their own piece, just like how many different emotions like one piece of music can make someone feel.
Yeah, so I think my first impressions of the music were more just really dramatic and a bit on the sad side. And that's kind of as far as I think I thought of it. Mostly just throughout the whole song, pretty sad and maybe depressing. But after listening to it more and more, I think I've heard that there's more movement to the theme and emotion that I interpret from it. So when I listen to it now and when I choreograph to it now, I hear more of a movement and more like triumphant moments. And there's still those sad moments, but I think that it moves back and forth between the highs and the lows.
I definitely agree with you that when I was first hearing it, especially with like when you see the dancing of like Dying Swan, like the traditional dance, it's very like sad and like someone's being like oppressed and everything. And I think just by listening to it, you can sort of find that, like you were saying, it's more like triumphant, almost as someone's like trying to break through something, and almost like the opposite of being like what I first thought it was. So I think just like my mind's been opened up more to of all the different things that come out from this music.
I don't have a lot of experience with Dying Swan before this special rep project. I'd seen the dance, but not very often or very much. So I think off the bat, I didn't have as much first impressions and images of dancers already, as much as other people have who've seen the piece more. But I think additionally, seeing everybody else's interpretations, improvisations, and choreographies has even more so allowed me to see how you can interpret the music different ways in different styles of dance and in different movements.
Thinking outside of the Dying Swan, I feel like the music, it relates to like anyone's life, because the piano and the cello, I feel like they're having that conversation between each other, and that conversation like signifies our emotions that we all feel every day. So when I first heard the music, I thought it was really sad because I was trying to picture the Dying Swan. But then as I was thinking more about it, I heard the cello, and that made me feel more like uplifting and joyful, or like overcoming some type of hardship. So I guess in the beginning, I could make my dancing more like, I guess, sadder and depressed. And then in the ending, I'll like rise above that and then overcome whatever it is.
Actually, interesting kind of contrast to yours. I think the cello embodies something more of a longing or loss, maybe a loss of myself, especially now, kind of feeling a little bit trapped maybe in my own mind. So I kind of want to incorporate a little bit of that into the choreography.
How I see it is that a lot of the classical ballets are adaptations of pre-existing stories. So, for example, Cinderella or Sleeping Beauty are both stories that existed and that some choreographer wanted to turn into a ballet. And so I think that moving forward to be more inclusive gender-wise, that either stories could be created that feature protagonists of both genders and characters who exhibit different, different ways of life, or finding stories with those characters and then turning those into ballets could lead to a more, progressive and inclusive ballet world.
I like the idea that you mentioned with the stories. I think the idea of maybe taking stories that are maybe don't have necessarily a gender assigned to it, just maybe like a feeling, an emotion, a character. That doesn't necessarily have to be a guy or a girl.
I really like the ideas of same gender partnering. I think that would be really interesting to see more of. I've seen it like a bit, but not too much.
Even with the same gender partnering, you can see that more in contemporary or like modern works, but for ballet, it's really rare. And having the lead guy, that could really help to change the ballet.
Well, for me, I think it's about like it's just the song itself is like a peaceful atmosphere. You're kind of like everywhere and nowhere at once.
I mean, I think I probably associate similar feelings. I remember when we first started working on it, like we had an exercise where we talked about like what words we thought of. And I just remember a lot of people kind of mentioned longing. So that's what I think of.
For my piece, I'm trying to associate it with like stress relief and with my character longing to be in a place so that they can finally relax and step away sort of from the problems that they're and weight that they're putting on themselves.
I definitely thought the song was like a lot sadder and it wasn't as like flexible as like I now realized it was with all of our talking and questioning about what the song truly is.
I definitely agree. There's like a sort of sadness to the song that's very unique. I think because what we first started off by doing was like I think it was the first class we had improv, and I immediately knew what I wanted to base my piece off of just after that. I think because of the music.
I feel like unlike the others, I kind of didn't know what I wanted to base my piece around for like a long time. And it took like after we discussed everything and heard the music so many times before I kind of was able to relate it to my own life, you know? So it's evolved a lot, but I'm happy with where it is now.
At first, I just saw a lot of blue and yellow because I associate blue with like death. And then at the end, I see more yellow and white when it's a lot more expansive and freeing. So I think I see kind of like a blue to yellow ombre kind of thing. So I see it in the color, not an actual like picture.
So one, I guess this is more of an object than an image, but thing that I associate with my piece is either like a candle or a bonfire. And I think one reason is I've always been very scared of fire, but I also find it very beautiful, like the way that it moves. And I also think that the relationship between the fire itself and whatever its source is, like the wax or the kindling or something, is very interesting because that fire depends on that.
In my piece, in the beginning, I'm a lot more scared and I'm just going through a really bad time, a really bad karmic cycle. And as the music goes on, I start to feel more free and start to feel alive. And you like break that karmic cycle and you kind of reach that nirvana sense, because that's how I see the music, which I think it's really interesting that all four of us see the music so differently.
I kind of try to like portray that fire that's like dwindling. So in the beginning, I kind of have larger movements, and then as the piece goes on, I kind of am getting smaller and smaller until eventually I burn out.
The thing that I wanted to say is that I really like the process that we're doing and just getting to do this project in general. I've been at many schools, you know, and there wasn't anything like this. And I think it's really nice to get to do something such like a big project in my eyes that, you know, we all can go on the journey together. It's not just a single improv class. This is us really figuring out how we interpret music, how we feel about ourselves in the music and our dancing, and just kind of the way we see ballet and dance in general. And I know for me, this whole project, it's been emotional and it's been not emotional, because I've definitely learned some things about myself. And I think it's quite interesting that I got to do that with this project. So thank you.
I think another great thing that this project has allowed us to do is kind of like we've all been in these little spaces for a little over a year now, and this has kind of allowed us to create these little worlds for this 3-minute piece and really focus on that space and focus on our character and where they came from and where they might go after the piece and the imagery and all of that. And I think that's been a really nice outlet for such a difficult time. And I've just really appreciated that. So like Jillian was saying, thank you.
I wanted my characters to represent not a single person, but rather what I think is a fairly universal experience for dancers. She's the heart of dance, the reason for passion and joy and intrinsic motivation. She's that soul almost that a dancer slips into and becomes when dancing. I was inspired to tell this story, this dancer's story, when I started to come back from my injury. And I was finally able to turn and move a little, and I was just so excited that it was as if there was this sudden congruence between my heart and mind. It's the feeling of being at home, because a ballet studio is a home, and of understanding on a deep level passion.
My character is more fictional. I made a fictional character for my piece. His name is Hank Green, and he is a sergeant for the U.S. Army during World War II, specifically in 1944. I kind of based him a lot off my actual grandfather who served in World War II, and I kind of wanted to make this piece in honor of him. So that's why I decided to go with this route.
My character is, to be more precise, he's a young person, so roughly in his 20s. He's a bit naive, as many young people are, and he's also inexperienced. He only knows the world that he has lived in, so he doesn't know that there's something else that's different from his world, and that really affects his behavior when he moves into a different world in my story.
My character is the soul of a 16-year-old girl named Piper, and Piper lives this life in which she wants to escape from reality. And in my piece, she decides to leave her home one night and try to escape from the world she's living in order to experience something new.
So my story is my soul, my entity is kind of like floating and just experiencing life in colors and experiencing emotion and trials and tribulations and all those things in colors.
So in my story, there are two characters. There's an average dancer wearing just jeans and a t-shirt, and then there's the inner dancer, the Swan. And so it's a story about finding that inner swan. There's a Ralph Waldo Emerson quote that I really love. It's "Fiction reveals truths that reality obscures." That's a sort of defining theme in my piece, that the inner swan, although she may be fiction, she's as real as the girl in the pond, and I would argue more important.
My character Piper is entering this forest after she leaves her house to escape from the reality that she's living in. And in this forest, surrounding her are these beautiful green trees, and some have pink flowers in them. And they're really tall. They make her feel small in this forest. It's something that she's not used to. So it's springtime, and the air around her is very warm, but there's this chilly breeze that comes up behind her, and it's almost contrasting, like the warm feeling with the cold feeling. In a way, another part of her is trying to drag her back, which is the cold against the warm.
So I'm in, it's as expansive as a baseball field, but instead of sand, it's filled with grass. It's still cold from the lack of sun, but it's really fresh, it's really dewy because there's wetness from the rain everywhere. In my piece, I'm also imagining a slight wind, just because I always put that with rain. And the predominant colors, I think, are just earth tones, but really vivid. And the costume I'm wearing is, I want it to represent like the purity and the innocence of that time. So my costume is just a simple blue dress. I feel at this moment really light and really weightless because I haven't experienced the struggles of age and maturity, and a part of me feels transcendent because I'm not living in reality anymore.
This process has taught me a lot about dancing with more intention, because in the beginning, when I started choreographing, I was finding it really difficult to find the right movements. But we had a few classes where we experimented portraying and dancing different words or emotions, and it definitely changed how I choreographed from then on, because I was able to choose my movements more intentionally based on the emotions that I wanted to portray and represent in my dancing.
Similar to Caitlin, I found that with
creating my own piece through this one piece of music, I was able to find more like reason and like why we choose certain movements over others. And also through listening to everyone's thoughts during our weekly discussions, I was able to see how many different ways the same item can be interpreted. Almost everyone in our class would have a different take on what it meant or how it made them feel. And so I learned to just like open up how I saw something.
I learned a lot about kind of understanding music more, and when I first heard the music, I kind of thought like, how am I going to make this work for what I'm like thinking about and what my intention is. But the more conversations we had, the more I was able to hear the different kind of levels of the music and the different themes and feelings and the different ways that it could be interpreted. And so those conversations really helped me kind of learn about the different ways you could interpret different things, whether it was like masculine or feminine sides, or like happy or sad, or different kind of like themes of like loss and grief or growth and rebirth. And that kind of really enlightened me in that aspect.
What I've enjoyed the most of this process were the Friday discussions and conversation, when we had the chance to share our thoughts and feelings, and we had the chance to listen to each other. I think for me, it was really good because I had the chance to explore myself like deeply more than usual. And I think it was amazing. Like having that opportunity was amazing. And I really enjoy also the opportunity to explore the piece of music as a thing, like as it is itself.
I think for me, the most enjoyable part of this process has been finding my own deep and personal connection just to a piece of music. I had a lot of feelings when we originally listened to the music, and I think taking that connection and my own personal interpretation of it and turning it into movement and choreography has been really challenging, but really enjoyable. And I've learned a lot from our discussions on how to take movement and turn them into my own personal ideas about this piece of music.
What I enjoyed the most about this process was being able to hear everyone else's interpretations of not only the music, but how it made them feel. I thought that it was interesting to see how all of their ideas were very different, but also very inspiring, and how we can all interpret one piece of music different ways.
So for me, what I want to do with the solo is actually the hardest thing for me, that is expressing what I feel. I've been always like so scared to show in public what I feel just because of judgment. And I feel that I'm having a really good time to be able to go inside myself and see what I really want to do and what I need to do on this, to be able to show and give something to everyone that is watching this.
For me, the most challenging and uncomfortable part of this process was allowing myself to be more transparent when we had our discussions. But what helped me move past it was hearing from others that I wasn't alone in this process, and that the emotions that I had personally were valid, and that I should be more confident and comfortable with sharing them. And I was able to take their courage as inspiration for myself to speak more openly about my thoughts during our later classes.
When it comes to like artistry and in a role, this has helped me kind of understand that each role has like a deeper character. And for technique, I think I just have become a little more mindful of where I am and why I'm doing what I'm doing, because this whole project has helped me like go deeper into myself and like my desires and my motivation and that stuff.
I think being at home has made me address some more uncomfortable emotions in this piece. I think feeling so much uncertainty and kind of anxiety throughout this year has been sometimes hard for me to validate within myself. And I think doing this process at home has allowed me to take those uncomfortable, difficult emotions. And so I think it's brought a different depth to this piece for me personally.